2 weeks before my wedding, my phone vibrated. A message popped up, and for a split second, my world tilted. The name on the screen was Lena. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, shoulders tight, breath short. It wasn't panic, it was muscle memory. It was the ghost of a wound I thought had scarred over. They say time heals all wounds, but that's not quite right. Time doesn't heal, it just teaches your body how to live around the damage. The message read, "Bend up, please. I need to see you. Just once." Things aren't what you think. I didn't feel anger. I felt insulted. After 6 years of absolute silence, after she had systematically dismantled the life we were supposed to build, she still thought she had the right to just knock on the door she'd slammed in my face. I didn't reply. I just stood there, staring at the screen, until my fiancée, Clara, walked in. Her presence grounded me. "What is it?" she asked, her voice calm. I didn't have the words, so I just handed her the phone. She read it slowly, her face unreadable. She didn't get angry, she didn't get defensive. She looked at me, her eyes clear and steady, and said something that cut right through the noise in my head. "You don't know her peace. But if she's still living in your nervous system, then she's already in the room with us." That sentence hit me harder than the message itself. 6 years ago, I was a different person. I believed in forward momentum. I believed that if you followed the rules, be loyal, work hard, plan for the future, life would reward you with stability. The night before our wedding, the wedding that never happened, I felt this strange sense of calm. Not excitement, just calm. The kind of quiet certainty you feel when you believe your future is a done deal. I had to go back to our apartment to grab the spare ring I'd left behind. I remember unlocking the door and seeing the lights on. My first thought was, she must be nervous. I even smiled to myself. That smile died in the hallway. I heard laughter. It was soft, slow, and devastatingly familiar. My body knew, long before my mind was willing to admit it, that something was terribly wrong. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. And just like that, without a sound, the entire world I had built collapsed. Lena didn't scream. Her lover, my supposed best friend, Mark, didn't jump away in shame. They just froze. But it wasn't the panic of being caught, it was the stillness of recognition. They knew. That's what destroyed me. Not the act itself, but the preparation behind it. The wine glasses on the nightstand, the casual comfort between them. The way they looked at each other before they even looked at me. It was like I was the one who was interrupting. Lena started to cry. Mark said something, a string of words that just evaporated into the air. I don't remember a single one. But I remember Lena's voice when she finally spoke, clear as a bell. "I never wanted to marry you." I wanted him. That sentence didn't just break me, it emptied me out. In that single, horrifying moment, I realized I hadn't lost her that night. I had lost her a long, long time ago. I just hadn't been notified. There was no argument. No pleading. I didn't fight for something that had never truly been mine. I just turned around and walked out. Staying would have meant begging for a fantasy. The next morning, my life was unrecognizable. I went into surgical mode. I canceled everything: the venue, the caterer, the florist. I sent out a brief, sterile message to the guests. No details. I didn't want their pity, and I didn't want the story to take on a life of its own. I packed 2 suitcases. No photos, no keepsakes. Just clothes. When my father called later that day, he tried to defend Mark. He told me I was being dramatic, that I was overreacting. And in that moment, something inside me just snapped. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet, permanent fracture. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just left. People often mistake leaving for weakness. But sometimes, walking away is the only act of self-respect you have left. Reinvention isn't some glamorous movie montage. It's messy, it's repetitive, and most of it happens in the dark. For the next few years, I disappeared on purpose. I threw myself into my work, a small tech startup that demanded all my attention. I worked until I was too exhausted to think, because thinking felt dangerous. I built walls. I didn't date, not seriously. Trust was a foreign concept. I never, ever talked about the wedding. The startup wasn't a passion project, it was a hiding place. It was the one area of my life where I had complete control. When success finally came, I didn't feel joy or relief. I just felt numb. It was like watching a movie of someone else's life. And then, I met Clara. She was different. Clara never pushed. She never asked me to open up or work through my trauma. She just created space. She listened when I wanted to talk and respected the silence when I didn't. One night, months into our relationship, I finally told her everything. The whole ugly story. When I finished, she didn't look at me with pity or shock. She just looked thoughtful. Then she said, "That explains why you always choose clarity over comfort." She wasn't trying to fix my past or replace what I'd lost. She was building something new with me, something that didn't need to be compared to anything else. So, standing there in the kitchen, with Lena's message glowing on my phone, I knew what I had to do. I finally replied. I kept it simple. Time. Place. Public. A coffee shop downtown. No room for ambiguity. Clara didn't ask if she could come with me. She just said, "I'll be there." It wasn't to protect me or to start a fight. It was to be visible. A quiet statement that my life had moved on, that my present was real and solid. Lena arrived late. She looked worn, like someone who had spent the last 6 years waiting for life to magically fix itself. The first thing she did was ask for privacy. "Can we talk alone?" I looked at Clara, then back at her. No. That single word felt incredibly powerful. It was a boundary I hadn't known how to set 6 years ago. Lena launched into a monologue. She talked about regret, about therapy, about how hard things had been for her. She was painting a picture of a victim, and she wanted something from me. Forgiveness. But it was forgiveness without accountability. She wanted me to absolve her so she could finally feel better. That's when Clara spoke. Her voice was calm, but her words were razor-sharp. "You're not asking for forgiveness," she said, looking directly at Lena. "You're asking him to carry your guilt so you can finally put it down," and that was it. That was the moment of clarity. I realized that closure isn't a conversation you have with someone else. It's not a gift they can give you. Closure is a decision you make for yourself. It's the moment you decide that their chapter in your story is finished, whether they agree with the ending or not. I stood up, took Clara's hand, and we walked out. This time, I wasn't running from anything. I was walking toward everything. After the meeting, you'd think things would quiet down, but Lena did the exact opposite. She escalated. She started contacting my work, sending emails questioning my professional conduct, even hinting at mental health issues. She was trying to plant seeds of doubt, to ruin my reputation because she couldn't control me anymore. It was a calculated, vicious attack, and that's when Clara stepped in. She didn't hesitate. She went straight to the legal route, clean, professional, and final. A cease and desist letter was sent, followed by a restraining order, and I didn't stop her, not for a second, because I finally understood that some people, like Lena, only understand boundaries when they are enforced by consequences they can't ignore. It was no longer a family squabble. It was about protecting my life and my peace. Clara saw that, and she acted. You might think that would be the end of it. But there was one last chapter with my father. He called me, not to apologize, not to see if I was okay, but for one last attempt at managing appearances. My wedding was approaching, and he wanted reconciliation. He said it would look better if we were all one big happy family. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. After everything, he was still worried about what other people would think. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just told him the simple, cold truth. You chose who mattered to you all those years ago. You made it very clear. And for the longest time, I believed you. I believed I wasn't enough. I told him he wasn't invited to the wedding. He was stunned into silence. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel a shred of guilt for choosing myself over his comfort. That door was now closed, and I was the one who locked it. Our wedding was everything I had ever dreamed of, not because it was lavish or grand, but because it was ours. It was quiet, intentional. And most importantly, it was free. Free from the ghosts of my past. Free from forced smiles and unspoken resentments. There were no apologies needed because everyone there was there for us, with genuine love. Surrounded by Clara's warm family and our small circle of true friends, I felt a sense of belonging I had never known. During our first dance, with the soft music playing, Clara pulled me close and whispered in my ear, "No regrets." She wasn't asking about our love, about marrying her. I knew what she was really asking. She was asking about the family I had lost, the connections I had severed. Looking into her eyes, I smiled, a real and burdened smile. "None," I said. And as the word left my lips, I realized it was the absolute truth, spoken without effort, without a shadow of a doubt. I hadn't lost anything that was truly mine to begin with. I had only gained everything that mattered. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've been through something similar, know that you're not alone and that peace is possible. After everything was finally over, the meeting, the messages, the legal boundaries, something I didn't expect followed. Silence, but it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of emptiness, but a clean kind of empty. It was the absence of noise. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up in the middle of the night, my mind replaying old conversations on a loop. I wasn't spending my days imagining what I should have said 6 years ago, trying to rewrite history in my head. I was wasting energy wondering how things might have turned out differently if I had just done this or said that. That endless, exhausting loop in my brain was just gone. And in that quiet, our realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. I didn't close the door on that part of my life when I met her again. I had actually closed it a long, long time ago. I just hadn't heard the lock click until now. That final meeting, that last message, wasn't about closure. It was just the sound of a door that had already been shut, finally settling into its frame. It was the final echo of a decision I had made deep down, years before I even knew I'd made it. A few days before my wedding to Clara, I found myself staying late at the office. Not because I had a deadline or a pile of work to get through. It was the opposite. I needed to be alone, to have a space that was just mine for a moment. I stood by the massive window, looking down at the city lights twinkling below, the cars like little streams of light flowing through the dark streets. It was in that moment of stillness that I finally asked myself a question I had been actively avoiding for years, a question that felt too heavy to even form in my mind. Who would I be today if I hadn't forgotten that spare ring all those years ago? What if that night had gone as planned? Would I have been happy? Would I have been myself? The answer came, not in a loud epiphany, but in a quiet and settling whisper from deep within. No. I wouldn't have been. I would have become a version of myself built on a foundation of compromise. A version that constantly felt that something was deeply wrong but lacked the courage or the clarity to name it. I would have been living in a relationship that called itself love, but where truth was always a missing ingredient. That night, the one I had labeled for so long as the worst night of my life, wasn't a catastrophe. It was an escape. It was a chaotic, painful, but ultimately necessary exit from a future that would have slowly and methodically hollowed me out from the inside, leaving nothing but an empty shell. Clara, in her infinite wisdom, never asked me if I was afraid of history repeating itself. She knew that wasn't the right question. Instead, she asked something far more powerful, something that cut right to the heart of the matter. One evening, she looked at me and said, "Do you know what you'll never tolerate again?" And in that instant, I knew. The answer was crystal clear. I will never again tolerate half-truths, the little omissions that poison everything. I will never tolerate silence when there should be honesty. I will never again accept a version of love where I am just a backup plan, a placeholder until something better comes along. Our relationship, Clara's and mine, it isn't some fairy tale. It's not perfect. We argue about stupid things. We get tired and snap at each other. We annoy each other over which way the toilet paper roll should go. But there is one thing we never do. We never doubt. We never doubt the foundation we've built. We never doubt the commitment. We never doubt the truth between us. And that single difference, that absence of doubt, changes everything. It's the solid ground beneath our feet, no matter how shaky everything else might get. The night before our wedding was a beautiful kind of chaos. We were sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by a fortress of half-packed boxes and bubble wrap. There was a cold cup of coffee on the table we'd forgotten about, and soft, mellow music was playing from a small speaker in the corner. It was one of those quiet, comfortable moments that feel more significant than the grand gestures. Clara broke the silence, her voice soft. "You know what's strange?" she asked, looking at a framed photo she was about to pack. I looked up. "If she hadn't betrayed you all those years ago," she continued, "you and I would have never met." I just nodded, letting the weight of that truth sink in. It was a thought that had crossed my mind many times, a strange, paradoxical piece of our story. "I think about that sometimes," she added, her gaze meeting mine. Not with anger. Not with any resentment. Just with acceptance. And that was it. That was the real goodbye. It wasn't a goodbye to a person, or even to a memory. It was a goodbye to the version of life that was never meant to be ours. It was a peaceful acknowledgement that our path, with all its twists and turns, had led us right here, to this moment, on this floor, surrounded by these boxes. And it was exactly where we were supposed to be. On the day of the wedding, I woke up feeling calm. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't anxious. I was just present. There was no lingering fear in the back of my mind that something might go wrong, no catastrophic what-ifs playing out. Because I knew, deep in my bones, that even if something did go wrong, if the flowers didn't arrive, or if I forgot my vows, it wouldn't matter. I knew who I was. I knew who I was standing with. And I knew that we could handle anything together. When I stood there, waiting, and I saw Clara walking toward me, my mind was completely clear. I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't comparing this moment to a ghost of what could have been. I wasn't afraid of a shadow falling over our day. I was just there, in that moment, seeing her. Fully and completely. And I realized that presence, true, and distracted presence, might be the rarest and most incredible luxury any of us ever get to experience. It's a gift, and in that moment, I was holding it with both hands. Life didn't magically transform into a movie scene after the wedding. There was no sudden montage of perfect moments set to an uplifting soundtrack. Work stayed work, with all its stresses and deadlines. Fatigue stayed fatigue, that bone-deep tiredness at the end of a long week. The routine of daily life, with its chores and responsibilities, stayed routine. But something fundamental had shifted. One enormous weight had simply disappeared. I no longer felt the need to prove that I had moved on. I didn't have to perform happiness for anyone, including myself. I wasn't living in reaction to my past anymore. I was simply living. Moving forward wasn't an act of will, it was just the natural state of my life. The past was no longer a heavy backpack I was dragging along, it was just a landmark I had passed miles ago, visible only in the rearview mirror if I chose to look, but I rarely did. I was too busy looking at the road ahead. Months later, I was in a meeting, and someone mentioned her name in passing. It was a casual comment, completely unrelated to me. And in that split second, I waited for the usual jolt. The tightening in my chest, the flicker of anger, the pang of old sadness. But nothing happened. There was no reaction inside me at all. Just nothing. It was like hearing a name of a person I'd read about once in a book. A distant fact, completely detached from any emotion. And that feeling, that complete and total neutrality, felt strangely, profoundly beautiful. I had always thought that getting over someone meant you stop thinking about them, but that's not it. For years, my anger and hatred had kept a connection alive. It was a different kind of bond, but a bond nonetheless. Hatred is still a form of attachment. It requires energy, focus, a piece of your heart. Indifference, though that is true freedom, that is the final, silent, beautiful release. Thanks for watching.